Sean, this week we're talking about financing and what happens on the financing end when you buy a home without that condition.
Yeah, so I guess the reason I wanted to talk about this is that people get caught up in what either is or what is perceived to be a hot market. Yes, sales are up in Kingston. We're not going to talk about those exact numbers today, but you know, people can get caught up in the emotion of things. So yeah, there's a recent story, it was from last week, where a realtor had double-ended the deal, and that's a topic for another time, but they had recommended, or the client had said that they were recommended to not have a financing condition, to pay over asking, and to not request a status certificate for the condo.
And this was all so they could get the condo.
So that they could buy it. You know, it's a hot market. The only way you could buy this is if you do this, this, and this, right? So, you know, we don't know exactly what happened in that situation. So, you know, who's at fault? I don't really know. The court's going to decide that, right? But I've got a couple of examples of some normal conditions on the first board. So, normal conditions are things like a financing clause. Can I get the money for this property? They didn't have a financing clause in this particular example either. A home inspection. Are there major issues with the house or not? A well and septic inspection. And the status certificate. So with the status certificate, the financing condition is fairly easy to explain, is that, well, you have to make sure that you're going to be able to buy this house and that the mortgage company is going to give you money to buy it, right? But the status certificate, it came up in this example. We don't have as many condos in Kingston, of course, as in Toronto or Vancouver, but if you are buying a condo, when you see status certificate, what the lender wants to know, or in this particular example it was CMHC, they want to make sure that, and you want to make sure that the condo corp can pay its obligations.
All right.
Things like, you know, their maintenance that they do on a regular basis. There's laws in Ontario where condos have to have a certain amount of reserves in order to pay any future expenses.
And you do pay condo fees when you're a condo owner that goes into this reserve fund.
Exactly. So that's really important for a lender, and of course for you, the buyer, to make sure that that condo corp is able to meet its obligations. All
right. And of course, this isn't just a condo issue. You hear about people waiving conditions in order to buy homes.
Yeah, you can't, this is a business transaction. You have to take the emotion out of it. I know that's difficult, but this can cost you a lot of money to go into this transaction, and you can't just walk away with it and say, oh, well. So we'll talk about what can happen in that case, but let's look at some risky situations here. So if you don't have a financing clause, you don't request a status certificate, there is no home inspection, and when you pay over asking. So we talked about paying over asking before. Quite simply, if you're paying more than what the house is worth, you're going to have to make up that difference in cash. Any lawyer would tell you to make sure that you have a condition in there for the status certificate. If you're buying cash for this property, it doesn't really matter what your conditions are.
No, I suppose not.
That's the risk that you're taking on.
That's right.
Yeah.
But for those of us that need the money in order to purchase it, you are taking on a great amount of risk if you don't have these conditions.
Yeah, exactly, because someone else has an interest in that property. The lender, possibly an insurer if you're only putting 5% down. So, and even if you were paying cash for this property, you don't want to be stuck with some large assessment from a condo corp as well, and that could affect your family financially.
All right, and you know, this works on both sides. We think about the buyer, but also from the seller's perspective, they're trying to sell this property, and if things go south and it falls through, they're back at square one too.
Here's the amazing thing, and it's so true, that someone can buy a house cash, they don't have a financing condition, and there's no proof that they have the cash.
Yeah.
You know, and which is unbelievable. But yet we put a financing condition in. A lot of the times the realtor is in touch with the mortgage broker. Can I get the CMHC approval number? Yes, can they waive their financing conditions? But yet you and I can go buy a property cash. How do we know that? How does that the seller know that we've got the cash in the bank.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, you get into these situations where if you pay over asking, for example, the home is overvalued. If there is a correction in the market, are you ever going to be able to make that difference up?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a couple of things you need to look at. Is that you know, if the property's only appraised for 300, it was listed for 299, and you paid 330,000, you got to come up with an extra 30 grand. But also, yeah, is it a good buy for you or not? Is this house going to be worth that or more down the road? So just be careful. Don't get caught up in the emotion, and get some advice, either from a lawyer, mortgage broker, or your Uncle Tom.
Thanks, Sean.